Good morning. Aloha, kakahiaka. Welcome to Wednesday morning. How you doing? Mm. What is it about that first cup of coffee in the morning that just is so wonderful? Well, how are you doing? It's good to have you here. If this is your first time to catch me live on a live stream broadcast here on social media, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Ronee Harden. By trade, I'm an editor, I'm a writer, I'm a writing coach. I love to help people craft their stories and get them out there in the world, share them with other people. So that's what I do. But on Wednesdays, I love to come live right here on my socials and just share a little bit with you and encourage you to write your books, share your stories, write your blog posts, create your content. Get it out there with people in an intentional way where you truly connect with others and share your stories. So that's what I love to do. On Wednesday mornings, I always come here and feature a mug from my wonderful coffee cup collection. And today's mug is a shout out to my lovely island home back in Hawaii and celebrating the wonderful Eddie Aikau Invitational that happened this last weekend. If you are not familiar with the Eddie Aikau Big Wave International, this is a surfing competition that takes place on the north shore of the island of Oahu. And it hasn't happened in 6 years. The reason why it hasn't happened in 6 years is because the weather conditions have to be just right so that the waves are just perfect. And this winter, because of the storm systems that have come through, and we've been dealing with them here on the mainland, but in Hawaii and on the islands, those storm systems that come through pass through the Pacific Ocean on their way to the mainland. Well, they create some amazing waves that happen on the North Shore. It's happened on the island of Maui. It's happened especially on Oahu. And the conditions were perfect this last weekend. I'm talking 40-foot waves. Now, if you can't imagine what a 40-foot wave looks like, I'm just going to show you a little something. I'm going to have to go to my socials page because um, it's just amazing. And if you look up Eddie Aikau, Aikau, you look up the invitational, you will be blown away at what you see. I'm going to share on my screen. Hold on, let me pull it up because this was just truly amazing. The guy who won it, his name is Luke Shepardson, born and raised on Oahu, on the North Shore, works as a lifeguard at Waimea Bay, took a break from work to surf the heats that day. And as soon as he was finished, he handed his check that he won over to his friend because he had to go back to work. As soon as the race was over, he had to go back to work as a lifeguard, helping all the people, especially the ones that don't listen to the lifeguards or don't listen to what's going on. And they ended up getting washed away. Some of them pulled back into the water. Water is pretty intense, pretty intense. So I'm going to pull up, hold on, let me pull up a picture because this picture right here says it all. I'm just going to say, this is on my private Facebook page. So let's see if I can share this with you. I'm going to share my screen. This was just amazing. I mean, watching them surf was absolutely phenomenal. Okay, let's see. Here we go. This is what I need to show. All right. Let me pull it up on screen here. I'm always fun when I have to. Okay. I'm going to do it this way so you can see it. Can you see that on screen? Look at that wave. Here, we'll do it this way. Make it a little. Oh, no, that doesn't work. Maybe this way. There you go. You guys, look at the size of Luke Shepardson on his surfboard. And then look at the size of the wave. So this was the wave that won him the title right here, because he not only mastered that wave and wrote it in, he had to stay on his board and write it all the way in. Absolutely superb. It was an amazing competition. And when you look at this, if you think of what it takes to write a wave like that, right? To stand on a board, and because just writing the normal waves that come into Hawaii when you're there, like on vacation, if you've ever paddle boarded or done anything like that, you know, the force of the water. I want you to imagine, and you notice that there's a guy down here, like right over here in this area. I don't know if you can see with my cursor. You see this guy right over here? Like there's another surfer here. There's other surfers that are waiting for that swell to come up so they can catch it at the peak and ride it down. Oh, you guys, it was absolutely, wasn't that amazing? Oh my Lord, absolutely amazing. So if you guys get a chance, look up the Eddie Aikau Facebook, Big Wave Invitational. It was incredible. Facebook. Oh, the wonderful things. So what a story, right? That in itself is an amazing story that happened around us. We also had some stories that happened over the last few days that have not been so pleasant. How many shootings can we have in a week in the United States? I ask you. How does that happen? We've also lost some great musicians. We lost the drummer from Bachman Turner Overdrive. We lost Jeff Beck, one of the greatest guitar players in music history. We also lost David Crosby of Crosby, Stills and Nash. We're losing great talent. But we also know that there's new talent coming up. New talent, new musicians, new singers, new composers, new writers, new people putting their work out there, sharing it with the world. Another great thing that happened, the Oscar nominations were announced. And of course, there's always a little kerfluffle about the Oscars because of who was not announced and who was announced and who was overlooked and who, But the Oscars, this is the film industry nominating and awarding their best, their top people. So you will see awards for Best Picture, Best Actress, Best Actor. But I'm always interested in the documentary films, the short films, Best Screenplay, Best Original Screenplay. Those are the people who write the stories, right? And they are acknowledged for their incredible work. So I've been going through a book this week. I have been going through a chapter in this book, and over the next 4 to 5 weeks, I'm going to be sharing more out of this book. But I am sharing some interesting tips and tricks to help you understand how to share your story better. So Julia Cameron, industry veteran, she has written over 50 books. She has come up with a 6-week program in this book to help you, if you are a writer, learn how to craft your work and have a draft. If you are doing the work in this book and following along with me, so I did an introduction. We went over chapter 1. Today, I'm going to be going through some highlights in chapter 2 that I think will help you sort of break through some of the blocks that you have as a writer. And also, by the time you finish this, if you do the work that's in this book, if you're following along with me and you take the tips in there and apply them into your daily writing habit, you will have at the end of this 6 weeks a rough draft. A rough draft, if you're diligent about doing it. I'm doing it because I'm trying to discipline myself so that I can get my book published this year. I've been working on some of the content. And whenever you sit down and you think about a project, the overall size of the project can be overwhelming. So you want to break it down into tangible tasks that you can work on. So I've been going through this book and I've been applying some of the tools that Julia has recommended for us. So you'll see me post things that say morning pages. What do I mean by morning pages? Well, Julia recommends that in the morning, first thing, when your mind is clear, and again, I understand. I have kids. I have to get up. We have to get to school. I understand all of that. Morning pages. These are daily pages of writing, stream of consciousness writing. And I'm not talking about waking up in the morning and posting first thing on Facebook. I'm talking about sitting down and taking time to write by hand. Okay, by hand. So that's what I've been doing. I have been writing in my notebook. I have been sharing and writing down all of the things. I have been making content, writing 3 pages. I have been sitting down and getting those thoughts out of my head, even on days like I've been dealing this week with medical things. I've had the last week and this week has been go to the doctor as many times as we can week. I have seen my chiropractor. I've talked to my primary care physician. I saw a neurologist on Monday. I saw an orthopedic doctor yesterday. You guys, I understand busy schedules. I understand having things going on in your life. But if your writing is a priority, if you want to make sharing your story and hopefully someday writing your book a priority, you need to dedicate time. And it doesn't need to be a lot of time. In fact, one of the highlights for this week is 20 minutes. Do you have 15 to 20 minutes in your day? I know you do. And if you don't have it in the morning, I want you to think about a time where you can sit and be uninterrupted for 20 minutes. I know you can do it. You have time. You have time to sit down and watch a Netflix show. You have time. You have time. You do have it. You're given the same amount of time as every other person in the world. Every creative person, every famous person. Every person wakes up and has the same amount of time every day. It's how they utilize that time. So let's talk a little bit about chapter 2 in Write for Life, because this is an important thing. And I think if you're applying these tools, this will really help you. Okay. So, if I only knew where to start, Renee, if I could just get started writing. I hear this so often. I don't know where to start. Has this ever happened to you? You want to write, and what I find amazing, and I tell all of my people that I talk to, or clients, or whatever, because what I do is I look at their social media accounts, and if we're connected on social media, I can see you. If you're on social media, and I can find you, I'm going to be able to find you sharing content every day, and the times that you're sharing it. And unless you're doing it where you are working through a schedule, or you're scheduling your posts, especially on my business page on Facebook, I am scheduling posts, right? So there is time to do those things, to sit down and plan that ahead of time. So if I can see you posting, I know you have 20 minutes because it took you time to think about that post and share it, and then go back and see if anybody's liked it, right? Come on, we've all been there. You post it, then you give it about 10 to 15 minutes maybe, and then you want to see is anyone liking me? Is anyone looking at my stuff, right? We have time. We have time. So here's a way to get started. I want you to think of the railroad system here in the United States, right? Or if you live somewhere where there's a rail system, right? A mass transit system. And I want you to think about what it took the city to lay track. Imagine the railroad system when it first started, right? That's something that we study in history. The railroad that was to get people from point A to point B, right? They had to lay that track. Well, they didn't just drop the railroad out of the sky and boom, we had railroads. No, they laid track. They laid section of track until they were able to connect one side of the United States to the other, right? So Julia talks about this in chapter 2 of her book called Begin Where You Are. Begin where you are. So laying track means to go from point A to point B without any concern that we're taking the best route. Okay. So we're laying track. We're doing this every day. Is it the best route? Is it the safest route? Is it the most efficient route? We don't know. We're just laying track. All right. So every day when you sit down and write, you are laying track. You are adding a little bit every day. And so if you are writing your morning pages, if you're doing this, and so yesterday I wrote, and guys, what I'm doing in morning pages has nothing to do with the content that I'm writing in my book, because my book is about all the stories behind my coffee cups, right? So this one, I can look at the cup and talk about my beautiful island home. Do you know how many islands there are? Talk about all the beautiful islands, the ones that I know of because I've been on them, and talk about even, the story of Eddie Aikau and the Big Wave International and when that started and how it started, right? But what I wrote about in my morning pages was me having to go to the doctor, me being frustrated of trying to figure out what's going on with me. Well, now I know. Now I know because I've been to all my doctors. But what I wrote in my morning pages was what I was feeling, what I was thinking, and it just came out. I just wanted to get it on paper. It allowed me to work through those feelings and to work through those thoughts so that I can then sit down and write a story about a cup. It allowed me to be able to have my head clear so that I could really write my stories about my cups. So that's what you're doing when you're writing morning pages. You are laying track. And if you're doing this every day, if you are taking the time to write every day, those of us who've been through NaNoWriMo, we know that going through that process during the month of November, we're writing consistently every day. So if you sit and write every day, you are laying track. And what will happen is, yeah, it is true, Savannah. It's very true. So what happens is you start seeing track being laid and you're making progress. And I'm telling you that by the end of February, if you're consistent with doing this with me, you will have a rough draft. And guys, it's called a rough draft because it's rough. It's not meant to be your best work. Again, picture the railroad did not just fall out of the sky and land on Earth. The track had to be laid, the land had to be cleared, the obstacles had to be overcome so that they could get that track laid and ready to connect point A to point B. So you are creating momentum. And here's a quote that Julia said in chapter 2 that I absolutely love, that when she sits down and has her morning time and she prays, she's a woman of faith. And so and if you want to sit down and you want to call it the universe or centering yourself and grounding yourself, to say, okay, God, she says, okay, God, you take care of the quality, I'll take care of the quantity. So by writing consistently every day, you get yourself in the habit, you get your brain in the habit of being creative and creating that momentum from where your creativity comes from. So the trick to this is to keep moving forward gently. Don't sit down and force yourself. Don't sit down and say, oh, I gotta write my morning pages. I gotta sit down and write something today. Mm-mm. Sit down, maybe outside. If you have a nice view from where you are, or cozy up with a blanket and sit by the fireplace. Or maybe you have a special place. We talked about writing stations last week. Maybe there's a place in your living room where you can look out a beautiful window and you have a nice view. Or maybe you have an interesting view because you're somewhere where you sit and watch people go by. Take the time to sit there, breathe in, and just write about what you're seeing, the people that are going by, how you're feeling. I have a couple of entries in here where I started, I had one that started off with the word, ugh. I did that. You're okay to do that, right? Here we go. This week has been rough dealing with my leg and hip hurting. And good grief, my handwriting needs work. That's what I wrote because that's what I was feeling. But I allowed those words to come out. I allowed those thoughts to come out. Allowed the flow to happen. And as I did that, it released my mind to then think about my story, to think about what I wanted to share. So moving forward gently every single day. And write your first thoughts down. Don't try to stifle them. A lot of times, your first thoughts are your best thoughts, something that just comes out of you with no force. When writing your morning pages, you are jotting down your ideas. You're not striving to think up ideas. You're not forcing yourself. You hear them, you feel them, and you write them, right? And when your writing is freed from the need to be perfect, from the standard to be perfect, you'll be amazed at how close to perfect your writing actually is. When you allow your natural talent to flow out of you without a question of whether it looks great or you did it right or it's on the page right, you take all of those things off and allow it to flow, you'll be amazed at how close to perfect your content becomes. So, as Julia says in chapter 2, right? God, you take care of the quality and I'll take care of the quantity. Now, another thing that you'll discover when you do your morning pages or as you're writing, you'll start noticing topics or themes come up. So as you're writing, you'll tend, and if you go back and look at it, you'll notice an overarching theme or maybe a feeling or maybe an idea pop up. And that happens. So look for those. Look for those main topics or those themes because those are going to come out of those pages and give you springboards to then focus on a particular direction that your story is going. Now, I talked about morning pages and how to do that. Julia touches on writing schedules. She says, I do not schedule my writing day by the clock. Rather, I schedule it by my mood. Writing schedules are a matter of matching temperament to the task at hand. So, what's your day look like? If you're not in the mood to write first thing in the morning, if you're grumpy or grouchy, you're not feeling good. You know, I had mornings when my hip was hurting and I had to get up and I had to be at doctor's appointments at like 8 o'clock. I was not in the mood. But when I got home, I was in the mood. I was in the mood to just sit down, ground myself, and sort of give myself the freedom to write about what just happened. I had a wonderful doctor's appointment yesterday with my orthopedic doctor. Oh my Lord, when he looked at me as an orthopedic surgeon and said, you know, I look at surgery as the last resort option. I really don't think you need surgery right now. We're going to try some other things. And then you let me know when it gets to a point where you can't handle it anymore. And then we'll talk about surgery. I could have just jumped up out of my chair and hugged him. But it was my first consultation. I try not to hug people on the first meet. But I can't help it. And so when I left that doctor's appointment and came home, I was just so freed. I was so freed to feel good about the day and just everything. I came home, I got my husband, I said, let's go eat lunch. I want to go eat lunch. I got to talk about how great a day I had with my doctor. How often do you come out of a doctor's appointment and are just elated, right? So that's what happened. I had a wonderful day. So match your writing schedule to your mood and your day's going. If your day is not great first thing in the morning and you've got kids to get out or get organized or whatever, but then find 20 minutes. Find 20 minutes, okay? Julia calls this grabbing time. There is this, she said, one of our most dangerous myths about writing is that it takes great swaths of uninterrupted time. Oh, if I just could take off from work for a year and write my story. Man, I wish I could go without working for just, I mean, even now at my age doing what I'm doing, I still work. I work from home. No one has great swaths of uninterrupted time. You raise your hand if you've had days where you've had hours and hours and hours of uninterrupted time. Okay, Bonnie, so you said you're doing morning pages, but it seems like all I'm doing is bitching, so this helps. Well, but that's okay because you have to get past that for the creativity to flow. Okay, because bitching is not creativity. That's just venting. That's getting some things out. But where's the true creativity in what you're writing, right? So match your writing to your mood. Find 20 minutes. Julia calls it grabbing time. She said, I've been writing since I was 18. She is 74 years old now. She says, I have never found a great swath of time. Instead, I found snippets. I found that writing could be done quickly. All that was necessary was to grab the time I actually had. Let me say that again. I found that writing could be done quickly. All that was necessary was to grab the time that I actually had. She said, my inner writer is easily bribed. Just write for 20 minutes and then I'll give you a treat. So, the practice of morning pages, here's what it does it trains us to write quickly, moving from topic to topic and thought to thought. If you sit down and just write, just get it out, get it out, get it out, get it out, it trains your mind to move, to write quickly and to go from thought to thought. So that when it comes time to writing, say, a story about this cup, I can sit down and write about, okay, there are 8 islands in the island chain, where they are located in the Pacific. I am from the island of Oahu. I've been on 3 islands on the island chain. My oldest sister lives on Molokai. Every island has its own sort of climate, if you will, and topography. I mean, the thoughts will just flow, right? I can write them all down. And then focus on what I want to tell you about this particular cup. Why is this cup different from my other cups from Hawaii, right? Because now I have to formulate a story behind them. So by doing this, you train your mind to write quickly and move from topic to topic. So Julia says, believing that we need a great deal of time is one of our primary writer's blocks. You are addicted to procrastination. Right. Right. That's right, Savannah. It's crazy what you can accomplish in a small bit of time if you stay focused. So when we do this, we are addicted to procrastination. Oh, addicted to procrastination. That, guys, seriously, when I came across that quote in the book, look what I wrote in the margin. Wow. Wow. We can be addicted to procrastination and use it as an excuse. We can come up with all these excuses. Well, I think this, or well, I don't know it. No, you don't, because you're not doing it. You're coming up with a list of excuses as to why you can't, rather than why you can. She says, when you procrastinate, thinking over your ideas over and over again, then you do need a lot of time to write because it's going to take you forever. But anyone can find 20 minutes. So when we write quickly, we write freely, and by writing freely, we are laying track, sections of track that are going to get us from point A to point B. The trick is to simply drop down the well, trusting that the flow of creative ideas is always running just below the surface of everyday life. The ideas are there. For some reason, you just figured out a way to procrastinate and excuse it and talk about why you can't. Why you can't. So she says, I have often called morning pages a radical codependency withdrawal. We withdraw our energies into our core. We are no longer swept away by the agendas of others. We stick to our own. We are no longer squandering our creativity, people pleasing, or posting on the internet or bombarding Facebook, right? Instead, we learn to please ourselves. Morning pages teach us that we matter. They perform spiritual chiropractic, moving us into alignment with our dreams, our hopes, and our goals. So let's talk a little bit about perfectionism, because this is one of the things. We have procrastination. We realize that we become addicted to procrastination. It's easier to talk about all the excuses about why we can't do something, and we are addicted to we are addicted to procrastination. I want to print that out and tape it to my screen to remind me that I'm just procrastinating when I do that. I'm putting off what I'm supposed to be doing. And that's why we get frustrated. Rough drafts are supposed to be rough. Remember, I said that earlier. They're supposed to be rough. They're called a rough draft. Name me one author that sits down and at the very first pass, Stephen King does not write his novels in his first pass. In fact, Stephen King did a lot of his writing early on in his life in 15-minute increments because he was working at a job in some kitchen and only had 15-minute breaks. So he would write on his 15-minute breaks. Rough drafts should be rough, she said, but we seldom give ourselves permission to write that way. Seldom, because we're too worried about form and content and what does it look like? And did I get? No, just freaking write. Write it all out, what you're thinking, what you're feeling. Perfectionism is the enemy of art. It stifles the creative impulse. Let me say that again. Perfectionism is the enemy of art. It stifles the creative impulse. It is the enemy of creativity, the enemy of freedom, and the enemy of a full day's work. Now, Julia does something pretty funny that I think is amazing. She calls her inner critic by name. So do you have an inner critic? I have an inner critic. Her name is Gladys. Gladys is like my older Jewish auntie who loves me so much, darling, and I love you, and I'm always looking out for you. But you know what? I don't like. I don't know if that's good enough. I don't know if anyone's going to really read that. You think someone's going to read that? Oh, you didn't spend enough time on it. That's Gladys. It's my inner critic. Julia's inner critic is named Nigel. She named him Nigel. In my imagination, Nigel is a British interior decorator. His aesthetics always supersede my own. My Aunt Gladys, she's always got a story, you always got a remedy, you always got I already did that, she's always talking to me like that. And so she says, Nigel will say, don't write about the weather. Nobody cares. But it's beautiful, I object. Romantic nonsense, Nigel says. I hush him again, although I recognize that with him, there is no winning. When I wrote The Artist Way, she said, Nigel told me no one would want to read it. That book has now sold over 5 million copies. So, who's your inner critic? Do you have an inner critic? I want you to visualize your inner critic and name them. Give them a name. Because what happens is you can't silence your inner critic, but you sure can minimize them. So my Aunt Gladys, okay, Aunt Gladys, thank you. Okay, love you. Here's some donuts. You have some donuts. You have some donuts. I'll see you after I finish my morning pages. And so she talks about Nigel, her inner critic, and she still deals with it at 74. She deals with Nigel. She said Nigel continues to exist, that its popularity is a fluke. She said, then it became a pattern. Nigel would tell me something terrifying about each new book, and I would become frightened that Nigel was right. So she said, my books were bought, the books were published, they went on to achieve lively success, and in my years of teaching, I have discovered that virtually everyone has an inner Nigel, a critic whose sole job seems to be discouragement. Okay? So the critic cannot be entirely eliminated, but it can be minimized. You can realize that so here's a fun exercise. I want you to name your inner critic. I want you to give it a name and give it a character and see it as that. Okay? Because then when you see that, you realize, Well, they have an opinion, but their opinion isn't necessarily right. So here's something else that is helpful to kind of combat that perfectionism. John Acuff calls this cutting the goal in half. Okay. Julia refers to it in chapter 2 as lowering the bar. That doesn't mean lowering your standards, it means lowering the expectation of what you can put out. So she says, all too often when we think of writing a project, we think of writing the entire project, right? Again, think of the railroad where they had a plan of how they wanted to get the railroad from the East Coast to the West Coast, right? But they didn't sit down and try to put the whole track in at once, right? So if someone says, I'd like to write a screenplay, like imagine these screenwriters who are writing screenplays for movies, and I think I want to write a screenplay. Do you think they sit down and write the entire screenplay in one sitting? No, of course not. So instead of saying, well, I would love to write a screenplay, but it's so much work, and what if it doesn't sell? You've already set the outcome expectation too high. You've already, again, this is just like being addicted to procrastination. You're already creating another roadblock or another excuse for why you can't. Think of it this way. She says, this is the trick of setting the bar low. One page at a time. One page at a time. You heard Elizabeth Gilbert say to write a letter to fear and tell it to go away. You could write a letter to your inner critic to do the same. Absolutely, Victoria. You can do the same. And it helps you minimize that critic so that you then are freed to write. So she says, writing one page at a time, making the amount of writing that we aim for an easily doable amount. When we set the bar lower, we trick ourselves into productivity. I wish I need a bell. I need a little something that I can ring whenever that happens, or get a hanky and throw it, right? When we set the bar lower. So, guys, if you set a goal like, I'm going to run a 10K, well, okay. But then when you don't run the 10K, what happens? You get discouraged. So rather than say that, say, I'm going to start training and run a little bit every day. So if I wanted to go, okay, I've been dealing with hip stuff, and I found out I have hip dysplasia. It's actually a condition that I was born with. And a lot of times people that have hip dysplasia don't realize that they have it till they get much older. Well, here we are. And what hip dysplasia is, here's what it is. So you have your hip joint, right? And then you have the socket that the joint sits in, right? That you're constantly doing. And for most people, their hip joints cover all the way around like this, okay? So you're doing stuff, right? Well, me, being the teeny tiny person that I am, and being little, this is where being a munchkin is not such a great thing. But for me, instead of having a hip socket that goes all the way around, my hip socket is like that. So the pressure point of where my joint is hitting, and so I've had days, guys, where I could not walk. When I say could not walk, I could not get in my car, go to the grocery store, go from the parking lot to inside the store without limping because it hurt so bad. I thought, do I need surgery? What's going on? And I had shooting pains down my leg. I had all kinds of weird stuff going on. So I needed to find out what was going on. So knowing that I have this condition, if I wanted to run a 10K, forget it. But if with my doctors and did a little bit at a time and strengthened my muscles and my legs, I might be able to do it. But I don't see any 10Ks in my future. So what are the goals? What are the goals? Writing just a little actually yields a lot. She said, you would be amazed at what you can mine out of 20 minutes of writing. And we think, it sounds, 20 minutes sounds like, oh, well, that's nothing, 15 minutes. I want you to set a timer today. I want you to set a timer for 20 minutes and just hit go and just write. I don't care what comes to your mind. I am sitting here writing for 20 minutes. I don't know what I'm writing about. Maybe I should write about and just let it go. 20 minutes is actually a long time. If we let's could we be silent for 1 minute or for 30 seconds? If I were to sit here on this broadcast and not talk for 30 seconds, do you realize how much time that is? Here, I'm going to try it. I'm going to set my timer. Let's do it this way. I'm going to do 15 seconds. And I want you to watch how long that actually is. All right. So here goes 15 seconds. Ready? Here we go. That was 15 seconds of dead air. 15 seconds. Imagine if I went a whole minute. Now imagine those minutes being 20 minutes. How much time that actually is. We are sabotaging our own creativity by setting limits on ourselves. We can mine that time. Everybody has 15 to 20 minutes in their day. So she says, writing just a little yields me a lot. It is, of course, a trick I play on myself and a trick that I recommend to my students. But in my experience, this has taught me that easy does it doesn't mean, oh, calm down. It means easy accomplishes it, it being the project at hand. So procrastination, it takes courage to end procrastination, guys. It takes courage. And we always tell ourselves that we lack the basic bravery to do it. We procrastinate because we think we must write our entire project. But to break that procrastination, we only need to write our first thought. Our second, third, and fourth thoughts will follow, and soon we are writing, and procrastination is a thing of the past. So here's something interesting that I want you to do, because she did this in the artist way, and it's called blasting through the blocks. I want you to sit down and think about all the fears and all the angers that you have about the book or the story that you want to write. What are your biggest fears? And I want you to put them on paper and list them. What are they? What are your fears? I don't think it's going to be good enough. I don't think anyone's going to read it. I think it's going to cost too much money to help get it produced. I don't know where to start. I mean, just write all those things down and read them out loud. And then realize, okay, so now you've gotten them all on the paper. Now just write. Just write. Because you've already addressed the fears. You've already acknowledged the fears. Okay. Now put them aside. Have them go sit over there with your little inner critic, right? And just write. Because if you do this, I guarantee you're going to find your creativity growing and also becoming more focused. She said, done the first thing, morning pages, they calmed my days and my personality. I became dutiful and accountable to myself. The pages became routine and necessary. Necessary. So the end of this chapter, here are some of the activities she gave. She said, just 20 minutes. She said, this week, set a timer for 20 minutes. Promise yourself that you will just do 20 minutes and then you can stop. So 20 minutes. So here's what I want you to do this week. I want you to set a timer, 20 minutes, go. And don't keep looking at the clock that the clock is. Just set your timer and then go. 20 minutes. And just write, just write, just write. And when the timer goes off, stop and then set it aside. Right? Then do that the next day. And then do that on Friday, and then do it on Saturday, and then do it on Sunday, and do it on Monday and Tuesday. So we would get back together next week. You will have 6 days of writing that you've done for 20 minutes. And I guarantee you will be surprised at yourself at how much writing you've actually done. Now, here's a sentence I want to throw at you that I want you to think about. And for those of you that are watching live on the broadcast, or if you're watching this via replay, I want you to throw your comments in here, okay? I want you to complete this sentence. If I didn't have to do it perfectly, I would You've been doing 5 every day. Some days you find myself not stopping until closer to 10 or 15. It's so good. Yes, Tiffany, see? Again, you've broken it down to something tangible you can do, and it's amazing what happens because, again, you find yourself not stopping until. I love that. I love that. So, again, finish this sentence. If I didn't have to do it perfectly, I would quilt. Okay. If I didn't have to do it perfectly. If I didn't have to do it perfectly. If I didn't have to do it perfectly, I would cook a gourmet meal. If I didn't have to do it perfectly, I would sew. If I didn't have to do it perfectly, I would write my book. If I didn't have to do it perfectly, think about that. If I didn't have to do it perfectly, I'd blank. I want you to put that up on a, put it on an index card or something and put it on a post-it note or somewhere where you can see it. If I didn't have to do it perfectly, I would what? Do that. This is a way that you break through those perfectionism blocks. Because perfectionism is telling you, well, you can't do it unless, you can't do it unless, you can't do it unless. No, if I didn't have to do it perfectly, I would what? And do that. Your inner critic, again, like Victoria said earlier in the comments, write a letter to your inner critic. Tell them how you feel, right? Aunt Gladys, I love you. I know you have my best interests at heart, but sometimes the things that you say to me stop me from doing my best work. Aunt Gladys, I know you love me and I know you mean well, but I need you to stop. That's what I need to tell my inner critic this week. Blasting through those blocks, right? From number 1 to number 15 or 20. Just do this. Write them all down. Write every fear, every resentment, every worry, everything that you think about your project, everything you're concerned about, that you're worried about, that you don't think people are going to like. Write all those things down. And when you finish, tell me that you don't have the urge to want to go past it, move forward, despite your fears. Because you've written them all down, you've acknowledged what they are, but they're not on paper. They're just on paper. You have one who won't let others read his work because it's not perfect, another who won't even try to sell her artwork because her lines aren't straight or images aren't selected or the colors aren't right, right, right. Sherry, if you didn't have to do it perfectly, you'd come up with an answer. Right. Right. And so a lot of times what we don't realize is we're blocking our own selves. We are hindering that gift that God has given us to create. We are co-creators, but we put limits on ourselves as to why we can't create, why we can't write, why we can't quilt, why we can't produce, why we can't do our artwork. You can't worry about those things. We are never going to be perfect. It is never going to be perfect. Even editing projects that I work on, I tell my clients in my contract, you and I will go over this a bajillion times and it will not be perfect. We're going to get it as close to perfect as possible, but it's not going to be perfect. So where we come up with this perfection standard, tough. It's tough. So these are some things that will help you blast through those things that are preventing you from doing your best work. So I want you to work on some of those this week. Save this video, bookmark it if you want to come back to it. If you have any questions, you can always drop me a note. Let me know how I can help you blast through some of those blocks, some of those creative things that are holding you up, because you've got some great work to do. You've got some great things to create. But I can't help you craft a story if there's no story there to craft, right? If there's no rough draft that we need to collaborate on and work on. You can't make a nice piece of pottery come off the wheel if you don't throw the clay on there and work with it, right? And it's going to fall over and flop, and it's going to have some edges and some little imperfections. But I'm telling you what, if we collaborate and work on this, we can get your story out there. And so that's what my job is. I love to do it. I love helping people get past these blocks, share their stories. Great. Listen, Bonnie, I'm glad. And again, Julia's book is fantastic. I just love this book. I am going through it myself. And so just know that I'm walking through this and doing it too. I'm doing it with you. It's not like I'm sitting here saying, "Oh, well, these are the things you need to do." Guys, I'm finding that I'm stumbling over the same blocks that you are. I've just been at this a little longer, so I know how to push myself past those things to create, but now it's getting the content created. So work on that this week. Let me know in the comments how you did. Were you able to get those 20 minutes of writing in every day? What are you finding in that writing as you're doing it, right? And then we're going to talk next week about trusting the process. Because again, writing is a process, right? Anything we do, there's a process to it, whether it's building a house or buying a car or sewing something or cooking a meal. There's a process. We have to trust the process, right? So we're going to talk about that next week. But I hope this has encouraged you. And if you want to find out more, again, you can always drop me a note in the comments here. I love to hear from you. Let me know how I can help. If you want to schedule some time where we can actually talk through some of those fears, talk through some of those obstacles, and really start looking at a plan to get your writing accomplished, we can do that. You can contact me right here at ronaeharden.com/contact. I have a place on there where you can schedule a free 30-minute consultation with me where we can sit down and walk through your project. What are your goals? Set some tangible dates to get those goals accomplished and work on a timeline so that we can see your project through from point A to point B. So I'd love that. So you can let me know. You can also join me for our book club. I love reading great books by great authors, sharing wonderful books. We discuss them in depth. We talk about the authors, talk about their writing style, their themes, what we liked, what we didn't like. You can join the book club. We're reading a great book this month. February's book is going to be coming out next week. I'm so excited about it. Guys, next week is going to be February the 1st. Can you believe it? Oh my goodness. February the 1st. We have 4 more weeks to go in this fantastic book by Julia Cameron called Write for Life. So again, contact me. Let me know how I can help you get your story out there and encourage you. And let's get our stories written, okay? Super, super helpful. Another great book that I wanted to share with you, a friend who put out his book, so excited for his book to finally be out. Here we go. Let me share this with you. Stephanie, is it a workbook? Yes, it is written like a workbook because, again, like I said, it feels like a workbook. It's about the size of a workbook, and it has the tasks in the back. The ones that I shared with you, she has all of the tasks in the back. At the end of every chapter, she has tasks that you can focus on and do every week. And if you apply those tasks, that's what I'm working on. If you apply those tasks, you'll be able to see. So like for your inner critic, she says, name your critic. You may wish to name it after a person, or you may wish to make up a name. She said, mine, as I've mentioned, is named Nigel. Then she says, what is the most common thing that your critic says to you? What is the doubt you are most likely to believe from your critic? What is the worst thing that your inner critic has ever told you? Now, take the worst thing that your critic has ever told you and turn it into a positive. For example, if your inner critic tells you that you will never be original and have nothing to say, you can convert this into, I am wholly original and I have many things to say. My writing is fresh, interesting, and unique. And all of a sudden, your little inner critic goes over there and sits in the corner. That's how, but see, that's something you take this book, you do that at the end of the week. So you read the chapter and then we do the tasks. So what I'm doing with you is I'm reading the chapter, I'm going through them, and then I'm giving you the tasks that you want to do. But if you want to get the book and go through them, the tasks are like detailed homework for you to apply these tools that she's teaching us into your writing life. And when you do that, I can guarantee you, you're going to see some productivity. You're going to see some writing blocks being blasted. You're going to watch your little inner critic, because your inner critic's not going to go away. It's always going to be there. But you can teach it how to just come along for the ride quietly, right? All right, guys. Well, listen, time is almost up, and we've been on here. Thanks for all the folks that joined live, that are commenting. Love that you all have been here. It always makes my morning a pleasure. I love getting to spend coffee with you and encouraging you to write your stories and share them. I'm working on mine. I hope you'll join me in getting your story done this year. 2023, guys, let's make it a fantastic one. All right. So for today, get out there and share you're awesome. You're going to touch someone's lives today. And you've already done that by sharing coffee with me this morning. Let me know how I can help. And I will see you back here next week as we continue to write for life. Have a great one.